My name is Owen Briggs. I had been married to Vivian for 6 years. She ran Crestline Capital, a mid-size investment firm in downtown Chicago that she had built from nothing, or so people believed. I knew the real story. That Thursday afternoon, I decided to surprise her at the office. I brought a small box of dark chocolate with sea salt, the kind she always picked first. I drove 40 minutes across the city and walked into the wide glass lobby with a smile on my face. The security guard looked up. "Good afternoon. I'm here to see my wife, Vivian Briggs. She's the CEO. He frowned, not confused, deliberate. "Sir," he said, "her husband is already upstairs with her." I blinked. I thought I had misheard him. "I'm sorry. Her husband arrived about 20 minutes ago." Then I saw it. Vivian's assistant, a young woman named Priya, stepped out of the elevator carrying a coffee tray. She handed a cup to a tall man in a gray suit and said clearly, "Here you are, sir. Mrs. Briggs is ready for you." My chest tightened like a hand had closed around it. I didn't argue. I didn't say who I was. I just said quietly, "All right, I'll wait." And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I was going to play this very differently than anyone expected. I found a seat near the far wall of the lobby, a wide chair next to a potted plant. From there, I could see the elevator, the reception desk, and the whole entrance. I set the box of chocolates on my knee and sat like any other visitor, waiting for a scheduled meeting. The staff walked past me without a second look. I was invisible. That was fine. I had never visited Vivian at work, not once in the 3 years she had been running this company. She always said it was better to keep home and work completely separate. I respected that. I trusted her without question. Then I heard two women talking near the front desk. Their voices were low, but the lobby was quiet and open. "The CEO's husband is here again," one said. "I know." The other replied, "He's practically running operations now. She consults him on almost everything." I kept my face perfectly still. Again. He was here again. Not once. Not occasionally. Regularly. The staff spoke about him the way you speak about someone familiar. Expected. Normal. The word husband sat inside his name like it had always belonged there. I looked down at the chocolates in my hands. Then I stood and walked to the front desk. "Please let Mrs. Briggs know she has a visitor," I said calmly. "Tell her it's Mr. Cole, a potential investor." Cole was not my name. 3 minutes later, the elevator opened. Vivian stepped out in a charcoal blazer, her hair pulled back tight. She scanned the lobby once. Her eyes landed on me and stayed there for just a fraction of a second too long. Something moved across her face. Fast, like a shadow crossing a window. Then it disappeared, and she was smooth again, composed, professional, unreachable. She walked toward me, wearing the kind of smile she gave strangers at networking events. "Mr. Cole," she said. "That's me," I replied. She tilted her head slightly. "I don't believe we have anything scheduled. What firm are you with?" "I'm independent," I said. "I've been watching Crestline Capital for some time. I'd love just a few minutes of your time." She studied me. I could see her calculating behind her eyes, measuring the risk. Then she said, "I'm afraid I don't recognize you. I think you may have the wrong person." And she turned around. She walked back to the elevator without looking back, like I was a stranger who had wandered in off the street. Like 6 years of marriage, of building a life together, loans, late nights, every sacrifice I had made meant absolutely nothing at all. The elevator doors closed. She erased me in 14 seconds. I sat back down and waited. 10 minutes later, the elevator opened again. Vivian stepped out, this time with him beside her. He was tall, early 40s, dark navy suit, no tie. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who believed every room was already his before he entered it. He said something low near her ear. She laughed, not her polite laugh, her real one, the kind I had not heard from her in months. He placed his hand at the small of her back, casually, like a habit built over a long time. 2 employees passed them and said, "Good afternoon, sir." They looked at him, not at her. He acknowledged them with a brief nod, the way a man does when he expects respect and receives it without surprise. Then he turned and kissed her on the cheek, right there in the lobby, in front of every employee, every visitor, and the security guard. Nobody flinched, because to every person in that building, this man was the husband. I let that land. Then I stood, crossed the lobby, and extended my hand with a warm smile. "Excuse me, I don't think we've met. I'm Cole. I've been looking at Crestline Capital as a potential investment opportunity." He looked at my hand. Then he shook it. His name was Dorian. He told me himself, relaxed and easy, like a man with nothing to hide. Vivian came back across the lobby a moment later. She stopped when she saw us talking. Something shifted in her expression, not quite panic, but close to it. A quick tightening around the eyes. Dorian turned to her. "This is Cole. Says he's been following the company. Interested in investing." Vivian looked at me, then at him, then back at me. "Is that so?" she said. Her voice was flat. "I'd really appreciate just 30 minutes, I said. "I've done a lot of research on Crestline. I think there's something worth discussing." She was quiet for a moment. I watched her calculate. A real investor was money. Money mattered. And she had no real reason to turn me away. "Fine," she said. "Come up." We rode the elevator together. Vivian stood slightly apart from me, eyes forward. Dorian stood close to her, his arm brushing hers. At one point she looked directly at me, and something moved behind her eyes, not recognition exactly, but something unsettled and watchful. She knew. She had to know. But she said nothing. The doors opened. I stepped out onto the 14th floor and shook Dorian's hand again. And I smiled at the man who had taken my place. Her office was everything I expected. Clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, a long glass desk. Awards lined the wall. The company logo was printed in brushed gold behind her chair. I sat across from her and watched her work in the room. She was sharp, controlled. She spoke about revenue projections and market positioning with the confidence of someone who had never doubted herself a single day in her life. I had always admired that about her. Even now, Dorian sat slightly behind her, off to the side. But he wasn't quiet. He offered numbers when she paused. He finished her sentences on strategy. Staff came in twice, and both times they addressed him before her. He corrected one of them gently. She let him. She called him her support system. "Dorian keeps things running behind the scenes," she said with a smooth smile. I nodded. Then I glanced at her desk. The wide glass surface held a laptop, a planner, a pen holder, and a small framed photograph. I looked once. Then I looked again. It was a photo of Vivian and Dorian at what appeared to be a company dinner. Both of them were smiling. My photo, the one that used to sit in a silver frame in that exact spot, was gone, like I had never been there at all. I left after 40 minutes with a business card in my hand and a quiet fire burning in my chest. On the drive home, I ran through everything. The guard's words, Priya's greeting, the missing photo, his hand at the small of her back, the real laugh she saved for him, the way the entire building revolved around him like he belonged there by right. I got home before Vivian. I made dinner the way I always did on Thursdays, roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, green beans on the side. I set the table for 2. I even lit a candle. When she walked in at 7:15, she kissed me on the cheek. Normal. Routine. Like nothing in the world had shifted. She said the chicken smelled good. I handed her a glass of water and said, "How was your day?" She set her bag on the counter and sighed lightly. Long, back-to-back meetings all day. The financial review took forever. I barely had time to eat. No hesitation. No pause. No flicker of guilt in her eyes. She sat down, picked up her fork, and talked about a difficult vendor call while I listened and nodded and smiled. I asked if anyone interested had stopped by the office. She said no, and she meant it so easily that something cold settled deep in my stomach and stayed there. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. She lied the way people do when they have practiced the lie so many times it no longer feels like lying. The words came out smooth-paced and warm. Not rushed, not rehearsed sounding. Just clean. That was the part that kept me up. Not the lie itself. The ease of it. I thought back over the past year. In late evenings, she stayed at the office. On the weekends, she traveled for investor meetings. The way she had gradually stopped asking about my work, my thoughts, my day, I had told myself she was building something. I had given her room because I believed in her completely. I had been giving room to a lie. The next morning, I waited for her to leave. Then I opened my laptop and started searching. I had access to some of our shared financial accounts. We had taken out a joint loan 3 years ago to fund the early stages of Crestline Capital. The loan was in both our names. I still received occasional bank statements. I started there. I went back 18 months ago, then further, cross-referencing dates, transfer records, and company filings I could access online. I was looking for something specific, and I was already afraid I was going to find it. I found it in less than 2 days. Crestline Capital's early public filings listed two seed investors. One was a holding company I didn't recognize. The other was a joint account in both Vivian's name and mine, the same account connected to our original loan. My name, my signature, my credit history, used to secure the very foundation of this company. But that was not the discovery that stopped my breathing. I pulled up the current stakeholder directory from a business registration database. It listed Vivian as CEO and majority shareholder. Standard. Then, below her name, listed as a minority stakeholder and strategic advisor, was Dorian Fail. I stared at that name for a long time. He wasn't just a man she was seeing. He had a formal ownership stake in the company. He was an insider with access to accounts, strategy, and decisions. I wrote everything down in a plain notebook: dates, names, document references, account numbers. Then I went back to the joint loan statement. I traced where the initial capital had gone into the company's first operating account. Then I matched it against Dorian's stakeholder registration date. He became a stakeholder 4 months after my money went in. My money had built the floor he was standing on, and he didn't even know my face. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me and let myself go back. 4 years ago, Vivian came to me with a plan. She had the idea, the connections, and the vision. What she didn't have was capital. I had savings. I had a solid credit score built from 11 years at the same company. I had worked hard and been careful, and it had added up. I took out a personal loan of $40,000. I co-signed a business loan with her. I covered our household expenses alone while she poured everything into the company. I skipped vacations. I turned down a job opportunity in Seattle that would have changed my career entirely because she said she needed me close. She built Crestline Capital on that, on my money, my credit, my sacrifices, and now she was erasing me. But what I found the following evening was worse. I printed the early loan application from our bank's online portal. Our signatures were both on it, mine as co-applicant, genuine, verified. Then I pulled up a refinancing agreement from 2 years later, my name again as co-signatory. But I had never signed any refinancing agreement. I held both documents under the kitchen light. The signatures were close, but mine was wrong. Someone had forged it carefully and almost perfectly. I did not call Vivian into the kitchen. I did not hold the documents in her face and demand an explanation. I did not do any of the things that felt natural at that moment. Instead, I closed the folder, put my notebook in a lockbox in my home office, and went to bed. The next morning, I drove to the office of Walter Ashworth. He was a business and financial fraud attorney I had found through a contact at work. I walked in without calling ahead and asked for a consultation. He was a quiet man in his 60s with a neat, gray beard and steady eyes. He listened without interruption for 40 minutes while I laid out everything: the lobby incident, the missing photo, the stakeholder filing, the forged refinancing signature, the joint loan, the full timeline. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward. "Mr. Briggs," he said, "are you aware that a forged signature on a financial document is a federal offense?" I told him I suspected as much, and Are you aware, he continued, that if your identity was used on those documents, you could potentially be held liable unless you take immediate, documented action to formally separate yourself from it? I sat very still. What does that mean exactly? I asked. He looked at me with steady eyes. It means this could destroy her, but only if you move correctly and quickly. I returned to Crestline Capital the following week. Still as coal. Mr. Ashworth had given me clear instructions. Gather what you can without alerting anyone. Do not confront. Do not reveal your identity. Observe and document carefully. I came in with a cleaner story this time. I said I represented a small investment group and was doing due diligence before a potential capital injection. That language, capital injection, due diligence, opened doors immediately. People in finance respond to the right words the way a lock responds to its key. Priya set me up in a conference room on the 12th floor with a company prospectus and a cup of coffee. Dorian stopped by 30 minutes in. He sat across from me, relaxed, one ankle resting on his knee. So you've been watching Crestline, he said, more a statement than a question. Closely, I replied. He smiled. Smart. This company is built on real vision. Most people don't recognize something this strong until someone else tells them to. He talked for 20 minutes about growth and strategy and himself. At one point, he leaned forward and asked, "What's your current portfolio size?" I gave him a number. His eyes sharpened with interest. He said, "Then you should stay for the full tour." And just like that, I was deeper inside than before. Vivian came into the conference room just before lunch. She sat across from me with a tablet and walked through quarterly projections. Professional. Crisp. Her performance was flawless. Dorian sat beside her. After about 10 minutes, he turned to me with an expression that was almost friendly, but carried something sharp just beneath it. He said, the investors who've done well with us are decisive people. They don't second-guess. They don't overthink. He glanced at my notes on the table. Some people come in here and look capable, but when it's time to commit, they fold. Small thinkers. He said the word small with a deliberate tilt of his head aimed directly at me. I looked at him. Then I looked at Vivian. She didn't say a word in response. She didn't push back. She nodded slightly, as though she found this reasonable, as though she was comfortable sitting beside a man who insulted a potential investor in the middle of a pitch meeting. I thought about the man I had been for 6 years, the man who took out loans and skipped opportunities and made dinner every Thursday night without complaint. Then I smiled at Dorian, wide and relaxed. You're absolutely right, I said. Small thinkers don't belong in rooms like this. Good thing I'm not one. He laughed. He believed me completely. The invitation into their inner meetings came sooner than I expected. By my third visit, Dorian was texting me directly. He had asked for my number during our second meeting, and I gave him one, a secondary phone I kept for work. He sent details about an upcoming strategy session and framed it as an exclusive opportunity for serious investors. I said yes immediately. The meeting was on a Wednesday at 9 in the morning. 6 people in a glass-walled room on the top floor. Vivian at the head of the table. Dorian beside her. 2 senior staff members. A man introduced as the company's financial controller, Bernard. And me. They spoke openly about everything. That was how completely they trusted Cole by now. I listened carefully, took clean notes, and asked precise questions at the right moments. Then Bernard mentioned something in passing, a cross-company transfer that routed funds through a third-party holding entity before clearing into the main account. He said it like it was routine, like it happened every quarter and nobody questioned it. But the way Dorian's eyes moved to Vivian when Bernard said it told me everything. That movement lasted less than 1 second. I wrote down the holding entity's name in my notebook without looking up. That evening I searched for it. What I found made me sit down slowly and not move for a long time. The holding entity was called Aldrin Consolidated. No public website. No registered physical office. One active director listed on its state business filing. The director was Dorian Fail. But that alone was not what made me go cold. I searched deeper, pulling up every public document connected to Aldrin Consolidated. A series of contracts between Aldrin and Crestline Capital appeared, dated across 18 months. On the surface, they looked like legitimate service agreements, consulting fees, licensing arrangements, management retainers. But the payments were unusually large for services with no documented output or deliverable. Mr. Ashworth had warned me about exactly this pattern. Then I found something worse. 3 of the Aldrin contracts carried a co-signatory. Not Vivian, not Dorian, Mr. Owen Briggs, listed as a secondary authorization party on contracts routing money from an account tied to my identity into a company secretly owned by the man installed in my place. I had never seen these contracts. I had never signed them. But my name was on them, authorizing transfers I knew nothing about. They hadn't just replaced me with another man. They had kept me alive on paper as a safety net, as a name to point to if investigators came looking. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was their planned scapegoat. I sat with that understanding for a full day before I moved. This was not just about Vivian choosing another man. This was not about broken vows and hurt feelings and a marriage coming apart. This was a deliberate financial scheme. They had used my identity to authorize questionable transfers. They had forged my signature on refinancing documents. They had listed my name on contracts I had never seen, signed, or been told about. And they had done all of this knowing I was too trusting and too far removed from the company's details to ever notice. I was not a husband who had been replaced. I was a scapegoat, carefully planted and ready to absorb the damage if everything fell apart. If regulators ever looked at Crestline Capital, my name was woven into enough documents that I could be pulled directly into it. But here is what they did not know. In trying to protect themselves, they had brought me inside. They had opened their meetings to me, their records, their inner plans. They had given me access not because I forced it, but because I was patient and quiet, and they underestimated me completely. Dorian had called me a small thinker. Vivian had agreed. They built the trap, expecting me to walk into it. Instead, I was going to flip it entirely. Mr. Ashworth moved quickly once I brought him everything. We met 3 times in 1 week. I gave him the contracts, the stakeholder filings, the forged refinancing agreement, the Aldrin consolidated documents, and a full timeline I had built from scratch, every date, every transfer, every signature that was mine, and every one that was not. He connected me with a forensic document examiner, Dr. Nora Pelt, who compared the signatures on the contested contracts against my verified originals from the loan application. She delivered her written conclusion within 48 hours. The signatures on the disputed documents were not consistent with the verified originals. The documents had been altered. I recorded 2 conversations using a device Mr. Ashworth provided and confirmed was legal under Illinois single-party consent law. One was with Dorian over coffee. One was a brief exchange with Bernard, who said more than he intended when I asked one carefully worded, innocent-sounding question about how fund routing worked at the company. I backed everything up in 3 places, 1 copy with Mr. Ashworth, 1 with a college friend I trusted completely, 1 in a safety deposit box at a different bank entirely. Then I waited, and the invitation I had been building toward arrived right on schedule, Crestline Capital's annual investor gala. 3 weeks away. They wanted Cole there as a featured guest. The gala was held on a Friday evening in the rooftop ballroom of the Aldrin Hotel downtown. I recognized the name of the venue immediately and said nothing about it. I arrived at 7 in a dark suit. I had not told Mr. Ashworth exactly what I planned to do on that stage. He had advised me to let the legal process handle the public exposure. I nodded and said I understood, but some things need to be handled where they started, in public, in front of the people who watched the lie get built and believed it without question. Dorian found me near the bar within minutes. He was in a generous mood, relaxed, proud, moving through the room like a man who owned the evening. "Cole," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Glad you're here. Tonight is big for us." He introduced me to 2 board members as a major incoming investor. They shook my hand warmly. I was completely legitimate in their eyes. Trusted. Welcome. Later, I stood at the edge of the room and watched Vivian work it, table to table, smile to smile. She was extraordinary at this, polished and magnetic, and completely in control of every impression she made. Then she raised her glass near the stage. "To everything we built," she said, looking at Dorian. "To the perfect life," he answered. Their glasses touched. 40 minutes into the event, I stepped away from the main floor. I moved toward the back corridor behind the stage, following voices I recognized. A door was partly open. I slowed. Dorian's voice first. "The Cole situation is almost locked. Once he signs the term sheet next week, we have a clean new investor on record before the end of the quarter." Then Vivian's voice. Smooth. Certain. "Good. We need that before the audit window." A pause. Then she said the thing I had known on some level since the afternoon I walked into her lobby, holding a box of chocolates like a fool. "Honestly, Dorian," she said, "I don't know why I waited so long to make the move. Owen was never built for this world. I outgrew him the moment the company became real. He helped me get here, and when he stopped being useful, I replaced him. He was nothing, a stepping stone I used and left behind." She paused. "He still is useful, technically," Dorian said. They both laughed. I stood in the corridor with my hand flat against the cool wall. My jaw was tight. My breathing was even and controlled. My grandfather used to say, "The best response to someone underestimating you is to let them finish." I straightened my jacket. Then I walked toward the stage. The MC was wrapping up a short growth presentation when I stepped up beside him. He turned, surprised. "I'll take it from here," I said quietly. "Mr. Fail cleared it." He hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then he handed me the microphone. The room held approximately 120 people: investors, board members, senior staff, company partners. The kind of audience that shapes a company's reputation with whatever story they carry out the door. Vivian was near the front, her glass in her hand. Dorian stood beside her, one hand in his jacket pocket, relaxed and confident. I stood at the center of the stage and looked out at the room slowly. I let the silence build for just a moment. Then I said, in a clear and even voice that reached every corner, "Good evening. My name is Owen Briggs." I watched it travel across the room like a current through still water. Several faces looked up immediately, blank at first. The name meant nothing yet, but I saw the exact moment it landed on Vivian. Her glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her face held its composure by training, but her eyes went completely still in a way that was not calm at all. Dorian turned his head toward her. She did not look at him. She was looking at me. "I am the husband," I said. "The real one. I have been married to Vivian Briggs for 6 years. I co-signed the loan that funded this company's first full operating year. And for the past several weeks, I have been inside this building as a visitor named Cole because when I came to surprise my wife at her office, the security guard told me her husband was already upstairs." The room was absolutely silent. I nodded to the AV technician I had briefed quietly before the event. The large screen behind me came to life. The first slide showed our original joint loan application. Both names, both genuine signatures. The second showed the refinancing agreement, my name, a signature that was not mine. The third showed the Aldrin consolidated contracts. My name was co-signatory on documents I had never seen. The fourth showed Dr. Pelt's forensic report, side-by-side signature comparison. Her conclusion is in bold at the bottom of the page. The fifth showed Dorian's stakeholder registration date against the date my loan capital entered the company's first operating account. People were already pulling out phones. 2 board members stood up from their chairs. A cluster of investors near the back turned toward each other with sharp, urgent faces. Then Dorian pushed through the crowd toward the stage. "This is completely fabricated," he said loudly, his voice cracking at the edge. "Let him speak," someone called from the back of the room. A board member near the front looked at the screen, then at Dorian, then slowly at Vivian. "Is this accurate?" he said to her directly. His voice was controlled and flat. She didn't answer immediately. That pause cost her everything in that room. Dorian moved toward the stage. "You need to shut this down right now," he said to me, his voice dropping into something hard and threatening. Two security guards along the wall moved across the room, not toward me. Toward him. Mr. Ashworth had called ahead. Two officers in plain clothes had arrived at the venue an hour before the event started and been briefed in a side room. They positioned themselves near Dorian with a quiet authority that made the guests around him step back instinctively. A murmur moved through the room like a wave breaking. One of the board members was already on his phone, stepping away from the group. Two investors near the back moved toward the exit with tight, urgent faces. The gala came apart the way things fall apart when the truth arrives in front of people who have money at stake, quickly, cleanly, and without mercy. Then, Vivian's voice came from the front row. "Owen." Her voice was thin, smaller than I had ever heard it. "Please stop." I looked at her. The composure she had maintained for years, through the lobby, through the meeting where she pretended not to know me, through every dinner table lie about her day, was gone completely. She looked smaller, not weaker, just real for the first time in a very long time. "Owen," she said again, one step toward the stage. "You don't have to explain," I said. "I know what I did." Her voice was low. The room was perfectly still, and she was speaking to me, or she thought she was. "All of it. I know." She stopped. "I was afraid to tell you the truth. I kept telling myself that if I kept things separate, you'd be fine, that you wouldn't really be hurt. You put my name on documents I never signed," I said. "You didn't just betray me as a husband. You turned me into a liability, a fallback plan." She closed her eyes. When she opened them, something in her face had given way completely. "I used you," she said. The words came out quiet and steady, like a confession that had been waiting a long time to surface. "From early on, I used you. I needed what you had, your credit, your money, your stability. And when I didn't need it anymore, I replaced you. And I told myself you'd be okay, because you always were." The room breathed. "I'm sorry, Owen." I looked at her for a long, still moment. Then I set the microphone down on the podium. The next 48 hours moved fast. Two board members contacted the company's legal team before midnight. Mr. Ashworth filed formally the following morning. The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation opened a preliminary inquiry into Crestline Capital's fund transfer activity before the end of that same week. Dorian was served legal notice at his home address 4 days after the gala. The Aldrin Consolidated Contracts, with my forged signatures listed as authorization, formed the core of the case. He was removed from his stakeholder position pending the full investigation. Bernard, the financial controller, agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for reduced personal exposure. He confirmed the routing structure and identified which documents he had been instructed to process without standard review. Crestline Capital's investor base began pulling back immediately. Two major partners suspended their commitments within the first week. The company's operating license was placed under regulatory review. Vivian called me twice on the Saturday after the gala. I let both calls go to voicemail. The first message was an apology wrapped in explanation, the kind that wants credit for honesty without fully taking responsibility. The second was just her voice, quiet and flat, saying, "I lost everything, Owen. I just want you to know that I know exactly why." I listened to both messages once. Then I archived them in the same folder as my evidence files and went to make coffee. I am not going to tell you that I walked away without feeling anything. That would be a lie, and I have had enough of those to last the rest of my life. I felt it, the loss of the person I thought she was, the years I gave to a version of her that never fully existed, the Thursday dinners, the loans, the Seattle opportunity one turned down, the 11 years of careful work I handed over without hesitation, because I trusted her completely. I felt all of it, but underneath the loss, there was something quieter and more solid, something I had not felt in a long time, the weight of my own name. Owen Briggs, still clean, still mine. No forged signature could hold against the truth when the truth was organized, documented, and walked calmly into a room of 120 people without flinching. The divorce was filed within a month. Mr. Ashworth's team ensured my financial exposure from every fraudulent document was formally cleared on record. I did not attend any further hearings. I had said everything that needed to be said on that stage. I moved to a smaller apartment on the north side of the city and began rebuilding slowly and honestly with no one else's name attached to mine without my knowledge. I did not destroy her. She had been building her own collapse from the moment she decided I was only useful, not worth keeping. I simply made sure the truth was seen by the people who needed to see it. And the day that security guard looked up from his desk and told me another man was her husband, that was the day I stopped being hers at all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. I will see you all in the next video.